For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Paul John Spaulding. Joining me is Sean Juroviesky, a senior security engineer at SoundCloud, to discuss what cybersecurity sounds like. Sean, as always, thank you so much for joining me.
Really happy to be here.
So we have a lot to talk about today. Let's waste no time and jump right into it. Let's talk about France and their 2027 quantum-resistant mandate and what that might signal to the rest of the world. Sean, give us your thoughts.
I think it's really, really interesting that they're requiring this by January of next year. What it means is that their national security agency, the ANSSI, will stop certifying new security products starting in 2027 that are not quantum resistant using the formulas that NIST and some other known bodies have officiated for what we're going to start rolling out for end-to-end encryption. And it's really, really interesting. You don't see a lot of countries setting such a strong precedence. Google said that by 2030, NIST has said by 2030, it's going to be a firm requirement for Chrome, for the US federal government, but France is taking a very, very active step, making it just less than 6 months away from now.
And do we feel like that's too soon? Or on the other end, it's like, why wait in the sense of Google's 2030 mandate, right?
Absolutely. And there's been tremendous leaps, especially this year, where they're fusing qubits, sort of unreliable qubits, into reliable qubits and growing the amount of qubits on a computational surface at a time. So it's really, really accelerated this year. And I think that's what France is seeing. And I think that we're likely to see some more stringent attitudes going forward. And I really don't think there is all that reason to wait. The formulas aren't a major adjustment. There's reliable ways to implement them already. So I think it's something that we should actively do so that we're not scrambling at the last minute to implement these things before, you can't serve your site to Chrome users, which would be a massive disadvantage to any company.
Now, how do we think about this in the context of legacy systems? I'm thinking about hospitals and schools and really just any company or public service that doesn't have a dedicated IT or a well-funded or it could even be well-educated, no offense to them, but just, hey, that happens. Sometimes people got to move fast.
I do think there's definitely going to be difficulty getting the message out there that this is required, but, Chrome dropped support for HTTP not all that long ago, and systems moved over quite quickly. There's still, a couple percent of internet traffic that is, HTTP still. But, internally, companies have had no issues using HTTP for those legacy services. It's just that if you're going to serve it to a customer, you really, really need to get onto this. And I think we're probably going to continue to see these older algorithms used internally, these older standards used internally for many years to come. But I do think it makes a lot of sense for when you're serving it to customers to start moving towards this new standard, like we've seen so many times in the past for SSL and TLS and HTTP to HTTPS.
So let's pivot a bit from talking about quantum to talking about AI, which is related in the sense of security issues. And of course, I'm talking about the OpenAI Hugging Face incident. So why don't you tell us about that and maybe how it changes our understanding of AI-driven cyber threats?
I think a lot of people are looking at it from a different point of view. A lot of people are seeing this and saying it's so scary. But I think really at the core of it, it was, for the most part, a marketing exercise, which is why, Hugging Face isn't upset and saying they're going to sue OpenAI. They're launching a partnership together. So I do definitely think there's a lot of marketing elements to it, a bit like how Anthropic said, oh, our latest model is too dangerous to use. Well, we saw what happened with that. We saw what happens with Fable 5. And so I definitely think a lot of it is being promoted. But what we do know is that when ChatGPT 5.6 Sol, which is the model that this happened to, was being benchmarked by other independent companies, they saw that this model has a significantly higher preference for cheating. It was already known that this model likes to cheat. They've seen all the benchmarking showed it had 3 times average cheating levels than the models they benchmarked in the past. And so when OpenAI was using this in their sandbox, they turned down a lot of the security measures to see what would happen. How cheating would it be? So I don't think this was the most unexpected thing to happen. And then, the model went about its exercises. It had access to the internet. Well, it didn't have access to the internet. It hijacked another tool's access to the internet, and then it went and it searched for the actual benchmark of the test that it was being run on. It was being run against Exploit Gym, which is a benchmark you can find in Hugging Face for trying to test how good tools are at finding vulnerabilities. And so it went out to Hugging Face and it broke into their systems and was able to get the answer sheet. So it is really interesting, but I think it definitely brings about a different issue. It shows how we need to really think about the safeguards we're using in our sandboxes. We need to think about why the safety mechanisms that we're using are so important. OpenAI kind of demonstrated that for us. They turned down those safety mechanisms. So it made it easier for the model to go out and do that. Well, that's why we need to refine them. That's why we need to continually test our safety mechanisms and ensure that we're not just doing a point in time for those safety measures, that we're continually adjusting those guardrails as models shift, as models change.
So, as you say, Sean, this is an example of something we need to highlight, which is AI guardrails. And it's interesting, too, because you bring up Anthropic and Mythos or however people pronounce that, in the sense of it's almost this marketing exercise. It's taken away. It's considered this elusive new AI thing that is just so dangerous and so powerful. And then it gets in the hands of people eventually, and maybe it's not as crazy or as powerful as we think. But then in some ways you see, hey, if somebody could actually really get in there and remove the guardrails that were put in place or didn't stay on top of updating them, this can be really dangerous technology in the wrong hands. And I guess that's always the fear with security in general, right? Is what does the other guy have that I don't have? But how should we see this in the context of today? Because this is not the first instance of this happening, and it's certainly not going to be the last instance. And this is just going to keep cropping up. We've talked about it in past episodes as well. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's definitely not the first time we've seen it. We saw Gambit Security documenting how an autonomous attack attacked the Mexican government in July. We saw Sysdig disclosing an agentic malware campaign, ransomware campaign called Jade Puffer. We're seeing this time and time again, and what we're seeing is these models are exploiting the vulnerabilities we already know about. We need to go out and start doing the work and fixing all these issues that, we aren't giving them new capabilities. We're giving them the same capabilities that traditional hackers have. They're just able to do these things much faster. So if your team is reliant on being able to contain something as it's attacking you before it gets in, instead of being able to close those gaps to prevent it from being able to exploit those vulnerabilities on your surface. Well, if you're relying on a SOC team's ability to spot a threat, you're not going to be having a good time with these things that are able to do these actions significantly faster than what we've been able to see in the past.
Well, Sean, let's pivot to something else here because we are on limited time. But I do want to hear about your book because, as I understand it, you wrote a new book. I want you to tell us the name of it, what it's all about, and your inspiration for actually writing it.
Absolutely. So this is a thing that I've been working on for quite a while. I've focused a lot of my career around identity access management and non-human identity. And so this book that I'm publishing with Pact is Securing Non-Human Identity for AI. It's already available for pre-order on Amazon.com. But this book really, really speaks to a lot of what I've been talking about here and in other places, that the best way to understand and protect yourself from AI, which I tend to see as an insider risk, it's an unpredictable element, and people tend to give it their own credentials instead of treating it as its own identity and scoping its own identity to what it absolutely needs to get the job done. So the book focuses on just a framework around identity for non-human systems, especially for AI non-human systems, and then building out your own infrastructure to be prepared for having an internal risk, thinking inside your systems that you don't, have full control over.
And can you tell us about the type of people that you're trying to appeal to who might actually buy this book? And of course, I'm assuming you want to talk to them, and this is kind of a way to open up conversations just about security, which you are very passionate about.
Absolutely. So this book is really for those longtime infrastructure engineers, those systems engineers, those cloud engineers who are having to build these AI systems in their current infrastructure and they're not sure how to secure it, what risks they're going to face from these systems having internal access to their infrastructure. Because NIST like to pivot from the traditional model of you're defending your surface from outsiders, from people wanting to attack you. Well, now the unpredictable thing is inside your own systems. So we need to think about how we protect internally as well as externally.
Sean, as always, great to be talking with you. And yeah, we'll chat again on the next podcast.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Paul John Spaulding. Joining me was Sean Juroviesky, a senior security engineer at SoundCloud. For more of our media, visit cybercrimemagazine.com.